How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Hello and welcome to Backlisted, a podcast that gives new life to old books. I'm John Mitchinson, publisher of Unbound.
And I'm Andy Miller, the author of The Year of Reading Dangerously. And...
Hi, I'm the producer, Nikki Birch, back for my occasional dipping my toes in the Backlisted presenting duties.
And the last time we were together was for our summer reading episode. Thank you very much, everybody, for all your feedback on that. We hope you enjoyed all the books. You read all of them, you finished all of them, and you agreed with us that they were all magnificent.
And now summer's over, you're ready for the real life.
Misty mellow kind of reading list for autumnal purposes.
And why are we here, John? What are we doing? What are we marking with this particular episode of Backlisted?
The beginning of our new season.
That's right. This is season 3 of Backlisted. But Nikki, what specifically is in relation to season 3? What is this episode?
Well, this is kind of a prequel of season 3, because season 3, well, you've had... we had a summer break. Thanks for your patience, guys. Hope you enjoyed the reruns. And season 3 really kicks off next week. But we thought we'd just dip in and do a prequel and give you a bit of behind the scenes, kind of what we've been reading, what we've been enjoying before season 3 kicks off proper next week.
So in a sense, this is a recap as well.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to hear a little clip now of Werner Herzog saying, saying kill him or something.
Fornication and death.
Yes, so this is like a recap before we launch into the season 3 proper. But also, John, what season 3 of Backlisted coincides with what for in the history of Backlisted? What else does this represent?
On the horizon of season 3 is, unbelievably, folks, our 10th anniversary. 10 years of giving new life to old books.
Someone give new life to us, please. In fact, but just as a spoiler, I die in episode 3 of this season, and I'll be replaced with a new Andy Miller.
If you actually die, that's going to be really prophetic.
I know, isn't it? It's going to hang heavy on our consciences.
Yeah, they'll be looking for all sorts of clues to the future. But yeah, we're very excited, and we don't know what we're going to do yet for our 10th anniversary show, but we've got plans are, I think we could say, afoot.
We are planning something special tomorrow. We can't believe it. We're so grateful, aren't we, as well, to everybody for listening to this.
It's astonishing.
For nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
It's sort of amazing, really.
Yeah.
So what have we got coming up in this show, though?
Well, okay. So in this show, we're going to be talking about some books that we've enjoyed, or some books that are coming out in the autumn, or the fall, if you're not listening in the UK, that are coming up in the next few months that we recommend. We're going to be talking about a few other cultural things we've been doing, or seeing, or watching, or thinking about, which is what we do on our Patreon only podcast, Locklisted, which runs alongside Backlisted. So if you enjoy this, you can sign up for more episodes like this at patreon.com/backlisted.
Yeah.
We do one of these every 2 weeks, don't we?
We do.
We do.
A sort of sister show to Backlisted.
If you are the kind of person who likes to get a podcast every week, then that's the way to do it. Is you get Backlisted, obviously, with ad-free, and you get it early, and you get Locklisted every second week.
But also, when we rebooted Backlisted for season 2, controversially to some, we dropped a regular feature. Also, we should say, for those of you who haven't been listening to Backlisted forever, season 1 ran for about 7 years. But
We should
anyway,
say that.
in season 1, we used to talk about what we've been reading this week at the beginning of each episode. But by the time we both recommended about 150 books each, John and I kind of were running out of a bit of road for that. So now we do that on Locklisted, and it's a bit freer, and we talk about all manner of strange things that we've been reading. So
we can talk about films and TV shows and all sorts. But it's also, I'm encouraged to say that looking at the very lively chat this week on our Patreon, the decision to move what I've been reading has been vindicated. Almost lots and lots of comments of people saying, "Oh my God, it's so much better going straight into the subject." So I think that's
so sorry, folks. We're now going to do what I've been reading this week. The whole of this episode.
Whereas this episode
that's all you're getting. That's all you're getting.
What we should put. You know what we should do? We should do our long-promised Ulysses episode. Ooh. We should put this out as Ulysses and then discuss it for 2 minutes at the end of the show and make this all what I've been reading this week.
Yeah.
The other thing that we are going to do at the end of the show. This is what we call a tease, a professional tease. We have an idea of the next few Backlisted shows, quite a good run of them, and we're going to tell you what they are. So we can tell you the books if you stay listening to the end for probably the next 4 weeks, 4 Backlisted shows.
Or like just use your fast forward button and come back. I don't care. Do whatever works for you. But yes, so we are in a position, quite unusually, to be able to tell you maybe what the next 4 or 5 shows are going to be. So we're going to do that nearer the end of the show. But first of all, let me ask, I've had 9 years now of asking this question. It never gets old for me. John Mitchinson, what have you been reading this week?
Well, I've been reading, I have to say, I read it not just this week. I've been rereading it this week. The latest novel by Sarah Perry, which is called Enlightenment. Perry.
Let's say our former guest, Sarah Perry, who has appeared on Backlisted twice, author of The Essex Serpent.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, wonderful book.
And also Melmoth, which astonishingly this week got an amazing puff from no lesser critic of artistic output than Martin Scorsese himself.
No way.
Absolutely. Thought it was completely terrific. I really like The Essex Serpent, but Melmoth is really the real thing. It's the real deal. So,
wow, it's like Marty's here.
Oh, yes, thanks. Rather sweetly, Sarah put up an Instagram post up saying, "I don't normally do this, but I mean, it is Martin Scorsese." And I think, isn't that fantastic?
Wait a minute. What was the show that Sarah was on last time for? It was a Japanese novel.
It was for the Japanese Graham Greene himself, Shusaku Endo. And it was silence, but of course, it was brilliantly done, Andy. Brilliantly done.
See,
made into a film.
I am good at this after 9 years. It was made into a film by Martin Scorsese. Thank you, my friends. Thank you.
So, who knows if that's how it all fitted together, why Martin...
Marty heard Backlisted.
I'm sure he did.
Approached Sarah and blanked us. Yes, that sounds right.
I think at the core, effortlessly segueing into his blurb for the book, at the core of this book, and I think at the core of all of Sarah's books, is
this is the new one.
Enlightenment is the knotty, complex challenge of religious faith. So this book is different from Melmoth, which was much more, I think, self-consciously in the Gothic tradition. I love that book. It's like The Essex Serpent, set in Essex, in the small invented town of Aldley in Essex, and there are 2 characters that kind of around which the plot is strung. One is a kind of middle-aged journalist called Thomas Hart, who writes a sort of amusing column for the local newspaper, and who becomes unexpectedly to him fascinated with astronomy. He wasn't expecting to like astronomy, but he becomes interested. And then there's his young goddaughter, who is Grace Macaulay, who has been brought up in a strictly religious household, who is in a relationship with a young man. and they are a kind of unlikely pair of friends. They worship at the Plymouth Brethren Temple. Now, we know that this is the backstory of Sarah's own life. And she talked in her first episode that she did for us on Backlisted, Father and Son, Edmund Goss, classic Edmund Goss book. She talked really movingly about her relationship with her parents. And indeed, I've interviewed her for this book, where she's talked again about that formative period of her life, kind of rebelling against it, but also still, I think, having a complex relationship with it. And this book, I mean, is as close to, I would say, and I'm using this as a, very high praise. If you like A.S. Byatt in her possession mold, then you're going to really love Enlightenment.
What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's contemporary fiction, but there is a historical subplot that there is a house that has kind of supernatural kind of stories around it, particularly about a woman who was seen in the windows, who's lived there, who turns out to have been, in fact, a missing female astronomer from the late 19th century. So she weaves in the way that she did in the Essex Serpent a really clever kind of plot. That there is a discovery of the papers and the diaries of this astronomer who is called Maria Vadova, and the way that the choreography of the book, I think, is just you're in a small town in Essex, but you're also dealing with big issues of faith, of the wonders of science, how you reconcile the wonders of science with religious faith. And also, it's a novel about love, unrequited love that is requited, but not in quite the way it ought to be. It's beautifully handled.
So is it a sort of small to big novel, where it's small things, big themes?
I was going to say, Nikki, I was about to say, for season 3 of Backlisted, one of the changes we're making is we're asking more basic questions of one another. John, how long is this book?
This book is about 380 pages long, so it's not short.
How gripping is it on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not gripping at all and 5 is unputdownable?
It's a solid 4I for me. I loved it.
Yeah, okay.
She's developing, I think, I really enjoyed the Essex Serpent, but I think she's turning into a seriously. That's why the A.S. Byatt kind of comparison for me. It's exactly what you want from a novel that is a. I don't even really mean that.
What you're saying is she's accomplished without being inaccessible.
Yeah, it's a, you know what? It's a very bloody difficult thing to get right, isn't it?
Indeed, it is.
And if Marty likes it,
can I read a little bit? I will feel that helps.
Please do.
So this is a little bit. It's called Perihelion, and it's obviously that Maria Vadova. It turns out has discovered a comet that nobody realised was there, and how that is worked into the plot, and the idea of we look up to the stars to see the truths about ourselves. We always have done, probably always will. Here's just a little bit. It gives you a real feel for the book. Now, Perihelion, Comet 330P/1889, Vadova de Lac, has crossed the ecliptic plane. It will rise in the east in the region of Pisces, tumbling head over heels in its haste. In the observatories of Paris and Kielder and Polkovo, its apparent magnitude is judged to be -1. Give it a clear night and a day or two, and it will outdo the great comet of 1997 and all the attending marvels and disasters. Aldley is waiting with the patience of the saints. It has no choice. Tinsel in the pound shop, blousy in the narrow aisles, white lights strung on yews and privet hedges winking out when the battery goes. Choirs rehearsing in town halls and sitting rooms and small cathedral naves. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth no great expectation of peace. Ronald Macaulay is sleeping in slippers embroidered R.M. to remind him of his own name, to assert that yes, here he is, here he has been, a man for whom no natural love could match his love for heaven. Children are coming home to Aldley on the London train, watching their own vast lamp-lit faces scud over Stratford, Shenfield, Chelmsford. We are giants in the land, they think. We could occupy the towns. And meanwhile, their parents, nursing lifelong headaches, tot up the costs of the day. Frost is paling the banks of the Alder, where smashed plates and dented wedding rings wash up in shopping trolleys full of silt. And in the basement of the old town hall, Boudicca's dismantled breasts are picked sore by holly wreaths. The tills are ringing in the jackdaw and crow, where schoolgirls and women and men are by turns angry or peaceable and never conscious of the cause. They make one body heaving over to the bar, drawing breath and singing they wish it could be Christmas every day. Prayers, holy and idle and sometimes profane, rise like sparrows from bungalows and offices where the tinsel is already coming loose. My God, look at that, and Christ, you frightened me, and Lord, make me good, but not yet. Snowdrops are coming up on the grave containing all that could die of Anne Margaret Macaulay, and she communicates in the litter blowing back and forth between the headstones. Oh, I did live, Thomas Hart, and I do, but I rather think the harmonium never really was in tune. Lovers are lying down in Potter's Field and can't believe they've found each other, can't believe their luck. It's quick and hard on account of the cold, but never mind that. Never mind the admonishing jays in the bare trees on the margin. It's done and dusted, and the night can get on with its business. Be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Southend United is 2-0 down, and the hero born of women crushed the serpent with his heel. The barrels are empty at the jackdaw and crow, and Thomas almost thinks that his Redeemer lives. The Bible is open in Bethesda's pulpit, and the broken pane of glass is coming loose. So the wind gets in and turns through Genesis and Exodus and the Song of Songs. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. And meanwhile, half a mile away, the Essex Chronicle is going to press.
You know what, John? Not only is that very good, what backs up your statement that she's becoming a voice, a ever stronger voice, is if you read that to me and I didn't know who it was, I would say, "Is that Sarah Perry?"
Yeah,
Really?
She's sort of carved out a real niche for herself in that kind of storytelling, and it's a bit of a high wire act. That it doesn't work for everybody. The kind of the small town elegy.
What's it called?
It is called Enlightenment. It is published by Jonathan Cake. It is out now, and it comes with very, very high recommendation indeed.
Does it cost 5p or £500?
It is 20 of your English pounds.
Oh, on the lower end of things.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
And it's, I have to say, a very handsome
That's
package.
in hardback. Obviously.
Thank you, Nikki. It's in hardback.
It comes. I told you.
Should you need it to know, it comes with marvellous quotes from Sarah Hall, who we love, and Francis Spofford, who we also love.
Season 3, in which we keep it basic.
That's what I'm here for.
Now, Andy, I'm going to ask you the question. What have you been reading?
Okay, so John, thank you for asking me that. First of all, before I tell you what I've been reading, I want to tell listeners that, of course, when we do lot listed, because we believe that books are not only defined in terms of other books, but all cultures feed into one another, we do also allow ourselves to talk about film and music and TV and whatever else crosses our theatre, whatever the arts, whatever else crosses our paths and influences
Cathedrals.
how we read and what we think about and the choices we make. And cathedrals.
Cathedrals.
Yeah, there's going to be a second spin-off podcast called Nave Listed, which will run through all the cathedrals we've been to. But I'm now going to talk about a couple of things that in my mind at least, bring all those elements together. Now, the first is I was, as I often am, in a record shop the other day, and I found this sitting in the remainder bin, and I'm going to show this record to my colleagues on Backlisted.
Get out of here.
John, can you see what that says on the cover? It
says
and read
Wailing and something songs on sailing songs.
Wailing and sailing.
Wailing and sailing songs.
Yeah.
On the
Days of Moby Dick.
From the Days of Moby Dick. Sung by Paul Clayton.
Sung by Paul Clayton. This is an LP. Okay. And there are several things to say about this LP. Nikki, I'm going to show you the cover there. And can you just describe what you can see there?
I can see a blue man with a beard and a cravat holding a harpoon.
And there looks like a spar of a sailing ship behind him.
Okay. So this LP is called Wailing and Sailing Songs from the Days of Moby Dick, sung by Paul Clayton. And I found it in a remainder bin in a record shop. And I thought, oh, I'm having that. And there are several reasons why I wanted to get hold of it. And the first is, listeners, if you like Bob Dylan, Herman Melville, Gregory Peck, Nick Jones, and for that matter, Paul Clayton, this is the LP for you.
Brilliant.
Because I'll tell you why. Obviously, the reason why there's a bearded man on the front cover who looks like Gregory Peck is the record was made to cash in on John Huston's film of Moby Dick, which was made in the 1950s. And indeed, this record was released in 1956.
Incredible.
1956.
Wow.
So this record is 68 years old. That's the first thing to say about
That
it.
actual copy.
This actual copy is 68 years old, right? Now, the second thing to say about it is it's about Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And no spoilers, but that might be a little clue to something that might be coming up later in the year. And so you might be hearing tracks from this LP. We can't say, because, for copyright reasons, and there's another reason we can't say. But, so it has a link to Backlisted. The third reason is Nick Jones, a folk singer who made a wonderful LP called Penguin Eggs, which has many songs about whaling and fishing on it. But Nick Jones's songs were written by Nick Jones. This is an authentic selection of songs from the 1800s that they would have perhaps sung on ships such as the Pequod, including The Maid of Amsterdam, Old Storm Along, The Dying Sailor to His Shipmates, Saturday Night at Sea, Admiral Benbow, and on we go, okay? And the fourth thing to say about it is, I'm going to guess that neither Nicky nor John know who Paul Clayton is. Do you know who Paul Clayton is?
I have a vague memory that he is one of those folk revival guys, kind of from that kind of Greenwich Village scene in the sort of 50s. So Paul Clayton is one of the guys like Ramblin' Jack Elliott, who is in Greenwich Village when Dylan arrives in Greenwich Village, and he is a mentor to Bob Dylan,
right?
And Dylan lifts, it's widely acknowledged, lifts the melody for Don't Think Twice, It's All Right from Paul Clayton.
Okay.
And their lawyers agreed on this. So it's like, but here's the really amazing thing, both of you, about this LP. So here's an LP that is 68 years old, that it was made to tie in as a film tie-in of a novel by a man who died over 50 years ago, who is an influence on Bob Dylan, who is in himself in his 80s.
It's getting
so it's
more
like
and more niche as I can hear. This is incredible.
Listen, Nicky.
Yeah.
It's still sealed.
Oh
my Lord.
Andy.
No one has ever played this record. It is new. It is 68 years old with that heritage going back to the 1800s, and it is new. And so if you're going to ask me, have I played it yet? No, I'm not going to unseal it. I'm never going to play it.
Have you listened to it on YouTube or Spotify?
Yes, it's on YouTube. So if you want to listen to whaling and sailing songs from the days of Moby Dick sung by Paul Clayton, fortunately, it's all on YouTube. How did this sealed American LP...
What's it been doing all this year?
Yes, where's it been? Across the world to Liverpool, different
It's
ports.
astonishing, isn't it? It's just, I love that.
In 2024. So
do you think there are other records like that, that are sort of designed from reading something? I'm so inspired by reading this book that I've done a whole kind of, a tribute to it.
I think what's so fascinating, Nicky, is on the last few episodes of Locklisted, we've talked about the novelizations of John Borman's film Zardoz and Peter Cook and Dudley Moore's wonderful film Bedazzled.
Yeah.
In a sense, these things, books and records can be, look, here's this thing. It's folk music, right? Authentic. And it's about Moby Dick, the great American novel. But at the same time, it's a shameless cash-in. That's why it's got a blue man on the cover who looks like Gregory Peck.
I love it.
It's like maybe we can shift a few whaling albums because there's a film out.
I'm guessing it's I don't know. Was he on sort of Smithsonian Folkways or something like that?
Yes, it's very much that.
He's probably done a few whaling songs before, right, as part of his repertoire. And some bright spark at the record company says, you know what, we've got this big movie coming out, happens to have a large whale as a sort of plot.
we'll
of
put
us.
you in the studio for the
What
afternoon.
about we
Can you
ju-
just bash through these?
Yeah.
Right. But also, John, I am a huge fan of the Coen brothers film Inside Llewyn
That's
Davis, which came out about
That's what I was trying to remember. That's the film.
which came
Yeah,
out
yeah.
about 10 years ago.
I
And
love
why?
that
The
film.
when I realised in the record shop what this was and was trying to give it a backstory, I thought, oh, I know where it's been.
Yeah.
It's been sitting in a box under the desk of Llewyn Davis's
Davis's-
manager for the last 60
So great,
years.
yeah.
Right? And it's just, and when I needed it, when Backlisted needed it, it
I mean,
manifested
and
for
Clayton
me.
could almost be that character, couldn't he?
Absolutely.
That's
absolutely
exactly the slightly frustrated, kind of not famous Bob Dylan one. Yeah.
So imagine, right? There's every possibility.
I've got to go
I'm
and
not being
check him out
funny,
now. I love it. I
that
love
that
it.
record has been handled by Paul Clayton because they didn't press many of them.
No.
How did it get to me? Anyway, it's found its home.
The Leaving of
it's
Liverpool.
come home.
It's come home to Liverpool.
Leaving of Liverpool, the
Yeah.
returning to Liverpool.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's my first thing. My second thing is I would very quickly like to talk about this book very quickly. It's called The Cooler, and it's a thriller by a man called George Markstein. Do you know who George Markstein is?
I didn't, but I do because I read the exchange that you had on Twitter about it. Markstein was one of the creators of The Prisoner.
He is the
Really?
Markstein is
As
the
in the TV show?
co-creator of the 1960s TV series The Prisoner, alongside the actor Patrick McGoohan.
Yeah.
And they fell out during the making of The Prisoner. I feel, Nikki, this is one of those things. I always feel Nikki is going to ask me to explicate things that to me are the bleeding obvious to listeners who might not know them. And this time, Nikki, I'm going to do it right. The Prisoner, right? I was going to say to you, American Pie by Don McLean?
I'm aware of that song. Yeah.
When I was a child, I used to listen to American Pie by Don McLean. And I used to listen to the words, I drove the Chevy to the levee and the levee was dry.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't know what either a Chevy or a levee was, that didn't put me off it.
No,
Right? I still liked it.
Because
And-
it was a
and to
great
some
song
extent-
that you could learn the lyrics to very easily.
Yeah. If you want to know what The Prisoner is and you don't know what The Prisoner is, that's on you, and you've got Google to help you. So I'm going to cut straight to talking
Can
about
I do a little précis of it, what it was? It was a 1960s TV show, a bit trippy, set in North Wales. There we go.
Shot in.
Well, no, it's not set in North Wales, Nikki.
Filmed in-
No.
filmed
It's
in North
filmed in
Wales.
North Wales,
Thank
but
you.
it's
in
not
Port
set
Merion,
in North
the
Wales.
amazing
Okay,
Port Merion.
filmed in Port Merion.
It's filmed in the village of Port Merion.
Okay.
A secret agent wishes to resign from the Secret Service. He cannot be allowed to resign because he knows too much. He is drugged and transported to a place called the Village. And when he wakes up, he doesn't know where he is. And the whole of the television, the series, The Prisoner, is based around his trying to escape.
And he is
So
number
George
6.
Markstein was the co-creator of that series. Well, he based it on, let me just read you from the introduction here. He said, I've been doing some research into the Special Operations Executive, and I'd come across a curious establishment that existed in Scotland during the Second World War, into which they put recalcitrant secret agents. And who was more recalcitrant than Patrick McGoohan? I thought it was very true. I thought it was an excellent idea to play around with. And such a place as the Village, it did indeed exist in Scotland. It was called Inverlair Lodge, also known as ISRB Workshop. Get this, John, or Number 6 Special Workshop School.
Wow.
Right.
So the 6 is located in Glenspeen in Inverness. And the thinking behind the Second World War is they'd had to train up agents in order to do their jobs who then knew too much and could not be allowed to potentially go out into society and reveal what they knew. And so The Prisoner, at least at the beginning of The Prisoner, is based on a real series of events. Now, what happens is as the television series goes on, Markstein and McGoohan fall out because McGoohan sees it more as an allegorical depiction of what we mean by freedom. And Markstein didn't see it like that. He saw it as very much as a kind of Cold War thriller. So he wrote, after he left The Prisoner, he wrote a series of novels, the first of which is The Cooler, and it was published in 1974. It's been out of print for years. It's very collectible, and it's just been republished. And after I just read you this bit, I will tell you where you can get it. But here's the beginning of chapter 1 of Markstein's novel, and see if this sounds familiar. Loach was awake for several moments before he opened his eyes. He had slept well but the bed was unfamiliar. His eyes still closed, he listened to the distant noise of traffic. Gradually, he relaxed. It was all right. He was still in London. No need to be tense yet. No pistol under the pillow. Not till tomorrow. He lit a cigarette. This was a moment to savour. The next few hours were his own before he reported to them. After that, 1,500 hours, they had said. 7 hours to go. Loach got out of bed and shuffled over to the window in his bare feet. He peered out. The mews was empty, except for a man fiddling with a car in front of the small garage. Loach enjoyed not having to study the man. This time tomorrow, a stranger across the way meant danger. A man casually fixing a car engine might be the first hint of the end, but not today. I'm not going to read anymore because you
Why
know
not
perfectly
today?
well what happened shortly after that, because you've seen The Prisoner. So
How brilliant.
I absolutely loved this. I am a Prisoner fan. I know many people who are Prisoner fans, but do you know what? As a thriller, George Markstein knew exactly what to do. I haven't read a thriller I've enjoyed as much as this for a long
great.
time.
That's great.
So it's called The Cooler. It's by George Markstein.
Yeah.
Markstein.
And who has re-released this book, this Marvel?
Well, you can get it, and you can get a limit. There's a limited run of print copies from a company called Plumeria Publishing.
Are they UK based?
They are UK based. I think they ship internationally, and I think there is also an ebook available, and you can find them at plumeriapics.co.uk.
Plumeria.
PLUMERIAPICS.co.uk, or just Google The Cooler by George Markstein. It was issued a few days ago on the 29th of August 2024, which would have been George Markstein's 95th birthday. I think if you are heavily invested in 60s TV or thrillers in general, or
Does it stand up as a thriller today?
Yes,
great
absolutely.
thriller.
Sounds
Oh,
great.
yeah.
Sounds
But also,
amazing.
what's ironic is, forgive me, it stands up as a thriller today because of the reasons that The Prisoner stands up today, which is more down McGowan's end of things than Markstein's end of things. So the idea of what we mean by individual freedom, dealt with however stylishly or wackily in the original show, is still kind of at the heart of The Cooler. It's just Markstein preferred to keep it more Ipcress-file than, I don't know, Billion Dollar Brain. And so I love what I was, and the other thing I want to say is I love how these books, John, in the last 10 years, in the time we've been doing Backlisted, because of the way technology has advanced and the market has gone, more and more of these sorts of books are being rediscovered and put into the market again. You know, Backlisted has been responsible for some of them. We don't need to rehash that now. But what I mean is, it's so lovely that either I, as a niche Nicky, as a personal prisoner nut, or as someone who just wants to read a good thriller, this book is out there again and can be found again and is easy to find. You don't have to pay eBay prices.
Slant in it give it something which is of interest. Is it very much like if I read that as a thriller now, because I love thrillers today, but does the fact that it's set and written in the 60s give it a certain edge that I think people would find interesting and enjoy?
Well, you raise a fascinating point, because had we read it in 1974, we would have read it as a contemporary thriller, and now we read it in 2024. We read it as a historical novel.
Sorry, 70s. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So the answer is, I think it works as both. It has a layer that it didn't have if you'd read it then, but if you're reading it to be thrilled and gripped and those other things, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a bit like the Agatha Christie's Endless Night.
It is like that thing. The golden age. The golden age was not a golden age when they were first being published. It was only in retrospect they were trying to be contemporary novels.
But
what I will
makes
say
it
is, if you do like A.S. Byatt in her possession mold, this probably isn't the novel for you. I'd stick with Sarah Perry, but nonetheless, it's really good. Okay,
does it have a kind of rogue male Geoffrey household kind of feel to it?
You know what, John? That's such a good comparison. Yes, in as much as it's certainly a post, as so many of those things were. I would say if you wanted to draw a comparison, you'd probably say Len Dayton more than anybody else. A kind of post Jeffrey Household mode of storytelling, etc., etc. So yes, Nikki, to answer your question, if you wish to be gripped, thrilled, chilled, and various other entertainment options, I thoroughly recommend The Cooler by George Markstein. But also, if you just want a bit of background on the greatest television series ever made, if you're a prisoner nut, you have to read this. So there you go. We'll put the link up on the website.
Time for a little break?
Yeah.
When we come back, Nikki Birch will be recommending one of the season's top titles. So stay tuned for that. See you in a minute.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
So, cups of tea at the ready. We're back in the room. Nikki, what have you been reading this week?
Well, I have been reading a book by a woman called Kalani Pickhardt, and it's called I Will Die in a Foreign Land. Have you guys come across that?
I haven't read it, if that's what you're asking, but
You know of it.
I have.
Did you hear, listeners, him hedges? Did you hear him hedges bets? Have you, Nikki? I haven't read it, and I haven't. I don't know.
What I should say, it's the old column to be. I have seen the book, and I have thought that looks interesting, and I haven't read it. So there you go.
Right.
But this is the thing. I've got you to do that for me, Nikki.
It's from 2021, so it's a relatively new book. It is a book about Ukraine. So that's kind of the headline why people might have been reading it more in the last couple of years after it came out 3 years ago. And I Will Die in a Foreign Land, the title is an English translation of a song lyric from a Ukrainian lament, which was sung at the mass funeral in Kiev in February 2014 after the military police shot and killed a load of 100 protesters, in fact, famously in Maidan Square. I don't know if you remember that time. It was in 2014. And it's a song about a son going off to war and his mother's fears of him dying in a foreign land. Anyway, and that's that time in 2014 is when the book's set. So it's around those protests. They form the backdrop to what's happening now in Ukraine and this is stuff that I have to say, it's kind of not very long ago in our history, but it's very easy to forget exactly what happened and the details. So as a kind of reminder, the president at that time, Yanukovych, he basically stopped signing an act which was going to bring the Ukraine closer to Europe, and instead went sort of more towards Putin, and people started protesting and gathering at this square. Right, so there's this sort of huge moment where lots and lots of people, and they do what's a bit like Occupy, they kind of, that whole Occupy movement, they go and they kind of live in this square, and lots of people start protesting, and the protests get bigger and bigger, and eventually the military police come in and they kill over 100 civilians, right? So it's huge kind of massacre of these protesters, and some police die as well, and eventually Yanukovych flees to Russia. Putin then decides he's going to annex Crimea and Donetsk, right? So that's kind of the kickstarts that war that then, it goes on and on and on until the war that we are aware of that's happening now. So this book is kind of set in this time around the protests, the Euromaidan protests they were called, and it weaves together the lives of people who are affected by this revolution and are effectively protesting. Mostly they are the protesters. Largely, they're the activists there, and they've all got backstories connected to Ukraine's kind of history, or in its Soviet past. Like one's a KGB agent, one's a Chernobyl survivor. It has it all from 4 perspectives, but it also shows it also has news articles and songs, and so it's kind of like it's quite hard at the beginning to understand. I found it quite difficult to kind of understand what's going on because there's all these different perspectives. There's these articles, there's these songs, there's these things, and you kind of, you read a book at first, you're like, where am I here? Do I understand where this is going? And eventually it kind of, unveils itself as the narrative and how everything interweaves, and eventually it kind of all makes sense.
Is it in translation, Nikki? Is it translated?
No, it's written by an American woman who's not Ukrainian at all.
Okay.
Really? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, and she talks about that quite a lot in interviews and in the beginning of the book, and you're sort of told, and why she just sort of says, I was interested and I went and did my research here, and
So that's very interesting. Sorry, forgive me, Nick.
No, go ahead.
That raises an issue which is very current, which is how do you earn the right to tell a story which isn't yours? And I would be fascinated to know. Well, I'd have to say, John, do you remember when we went about 5 years ago and did a show on Guernsey? Yeah. That the residents of Guernsey were very hostile to a particular novel about potato peel pies because they felt that the author had not even visited Guernsey before writing that particular very successful novel.
Like Taylor Swift's song set in the Lake District,
No, what are you doing? Don't bring the Swifties down on us. What are you doing? The recklessness of it.
The mountains of Windermere, those Windermere mountains.
Well, that's right, she did say that. I don't know what people in Ukraine think about this book. Maybe people listening could tell us. I would be surprised if they are particularly negative towards it, given it's very supportive of the current position in Ukraine and sort of So I think politically, people wouldn't be unhappy, but there may be inaccuracies and there may be things obviously that I wouldn't know.
And were you drawn to it because you felt you wanted to read a novel which would fill in your understanding of how things had got to where they are in Ukraine, or was it something that had crossed your radar for another reason?
Yeah, I think that, and also it's about it talks. I like the fact that it's very closely mirrors the political things that happened. So it's very much in the book. It says, right, this is when the Malaysian airline went down. Right. This is when and so the narrative is woven around political events that happened, and I think it then makes you want to go and find out about the political events. So the reason I want to talk, the other thing I did last night is I then started watching the BBC's Zelensky series, which tells of his story. This is on BBC iPlayer in the UK, and I'm sure you can find it elsewhere. I only watched the first episode. Have either of you seen that?
No.
I haven't.
I mean, I've only watched the first. It's 3 episodes, and it's the Zelensky story, and this is more recent past. Like we think, we kind of know the Zelensky story. He was a comedian, he was an actor. Now he's a president. Now he's a war leader, is what he says. But actually watching that, it's a bit like the Trump story. He played. The backstory. His first episode, the backstory is phenomenal. It's like, okay, you really did play the character that you then became, which was, he plays this comedy all about being a president because people really wanted to hear that at that time. They wrote that series because there was a feeling there was so much corruption and so much kind of sort of turmoil in the country. So they wanted this character who basically waded through corruption and just said, you know what, we're just going to be honest and reflect the people and do it. So he basically played the character, and he had these script writers writing all these amazing speeches, who then went on to write his scripts when he became president.
It has
it's incredible.
What you're describing has an analogy in the career of David Bowie, which, of course, David Bowie becomes a superstar by pretending to be a superstar.
Right.
He pretends to be an alien from another planet who's a superstar, and then he becomes an alien from another planet who's a superstar, and he loses his mind.
Right.
He simultaneously makes a series of the best records ever made, certainly in the 70s. So, yes, that one of those interesting examples of you pretend to be something and then you become the thing.
There's this amazing scene in the documentary where his wife, Alina Zelenska, she's sort of being interviewed, and they talk about the moment where he decides, because he's been playing the president, And everyone's saying to me, "You're going to run for president. You're going to run for president." And she's like, "Of course he's not going to do that yet." And then the last episode of the series, right, he hasn't said anything to her. The last episode of the series, he just puts like a public statement on the back of it saying, "Yes, I'm going to run for president," without even telling her, and you're just sort of thinking like the hugeness of that. Can you imagine? And he was like, "Oh, I just forgot." I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And her face says quite a lot at that point of like, fucking hell,
And yet you would have to say, wouldn't you, that degree of self-belief is probably useful in a leader under difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
That kind of character.
Yes, exactly. Of just knowing exactly, making decisions. And that's the sense you get. So it's really worth watching the Zelensky story. I just want to read a very small bit from the book. Can I do that?
Please do.
Because the other thing, apart from just third person's perspective and transcripts of audio cassettes, they have these lyrics from the Kobzari, and I hope I've pronounced that right, which is a traditional Ukrainian bard, apparently used to accompany kind of Cossacks during war campaigns. And anyway, there's sort of passages of either lyrics from songs that are clearly to do with what's going on. And throughout the book, Kalani says that these form like the thread in the book. So I'll just read you a quick one. Russian soldiers without insignia invade Crimea on February the 27th, 2014. Sung by Kubzari. So Russia takes Crimea. There's a referendum, a declaration of independence for the Republic of Crimea. The UN condemns it, but Putin flips the bird and builds a bridge. In the spring of 2014, the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic are formed. Overnight, Kiev had fallen asleep in peace and woken up at war. But, my friend, it's not as simple as taking sides. Think of Berlin. In one night in August 1961, a wall was built, separating brother from brother, mother from son, father from daughter. And so it is in Ukraine. Overnight, our neighbour is our enemy. But there is no wall here. There are only terminals. Donetsk Airport, Kerch, no man's land. When we shoot, we kill a neighbour. When we shoot, we kill ourselves. In Ukraine, the umbilical cord becomes the noose.
Wow.
Okay, brilliant.
Wow. Okay.
So it's quite
wonderful.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. I Will Die in a Foreign Land, Kalani Pickhardt.
Published by?
Penguin.
Okay. And approximately how many pages is it, Nikki?
It's a good question because I only read short books, Andy, as you know. And it just about scrapes the short book number, 313. But there's lots of wide prints, so you get through it quite quickly.
Okay, so it's 313 pages, but it's been printed large. Okay, so
Yes.
that's good.
Yes.
Okay.
£10.99 on paperback.
£10.99, okay. Very good.
It's actually slightly inspired me to see. I sort of feel there hasn't been much published by Ukrainian writers. There's Andrei Kirkov, who was already published by Harville back in the day. But it's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it, when you've got a major conflict like this? It obviously takes a while for it to emerge as literature. So I think it's really interesting.
John, I could ask you what you've been reading, but I'm going to break from tradition. It's season 3. We do new things.
Excellent.
John, what have you been doing this summer? What did you do for your holidays?
Okay, I suspect that what you're alluding to is my it's the wilderness vigil that I went on, which involved me going to Dartmoor. It's amazing old growth deciduous rainforest called Holm Chase, where I spent 4 days and 4 nights on my own. Extremely long, as it turned out.
Were you in the wild or were you camping?
I was under a tarpaulin, so I didn't have a tent. I did have I had a ground sheet and a sleeping mat and a
Did you have a
sleeping
fire?
and a sleeping bag. No fire. No fire.
Any food?
No food. Entirely without food. Water. Had enough water for the whole trip. And you are entirely on your own.
No Deliveroo.
Could you not get into Butler? Why did you do this?
As you know, I've talked about the work of Martin Shaw many times on the show before.
Oh, our guest.
Yeah,
Our former
and he was a guest on the Gawain show. But he has run
wonderful.
He has run this program for about 20 years.
So hold on. Some people pay him to go somewhere with no food and no central heating.
Indeed, Nikki, they do. You'd be surprised.
Martin's onto a winner there.
Well, I have to say it is extremely well. I mean, they've not everybody made it. You know, I think there were 10 of us who started,
and only 4 came back.
Well, no, there were a couple of people I think couldn't handle it.
But I can relate to. Okay, so we'd stop joking around. I can relate, John, to why you would want to get away from it all in a very hardline way. Yeah. You know, John, we're all busy people. John is very busy.
Very busy.
Well,
this year. And also, you know, you don't want to, if you're going to go, you don't necessarily always want to lounge by the pool. You perhaps you want to get a different experience.
Yeah. I mean,
and
you must have had a lot of thinking time there. That is a lot.
You would be amazed, Nikki, how long a day is. The last night you stay up all night. It is pretty astonishing how much time we have in our lives that we're not really aware of how much time we have in our lives, because we fill our lives up with endless things to do and to distract ourselves with. So
podcasts for a start.
And reading. I mean, interesting, isn't it?
No reading matter, obviously.
No reading.
I had to take no books.
I had a journal, and the recommendation was that that you just did a couple of pages a day. It's funny. You're programmed to always be looking to do things.
Yeah.
So it's in a way. I mean, and I think that the general consensus is not to over talk about these things, because actually I think if you kind of talk them out and put them in neat little boxes, they kind of lose some of their. But I will be thinking about this. I will be thinking about this for the rest of my life.
Was it hard? It sounds really hard.
Weirdly, the bit that was least hard was the not eating.
Right.
But the being in one's own.
Can we just contextualise that for new listeners? John does like to eat.
I do love to eat.
So that is a double twist.
I did enjoy that first cup of tea when you come back to base camp. Was pretty amazing. But no, I think the appeal, obviously, the idea of going off into the wilderness and it's a vigil. It's not therapy. It's not really a retreat. People say, well, would you recommend it? And I say, I can't possibly say. I don't know. I mean, ask me in a year's time. Maybe I'll have something more coherent to say.
You do sound very calm.
The astonishing peace of being in a place like that, very close to nature. There's not much going on, really. It's not like I kept thinking. You wouldn't do this in a Herzog rainforest, would you? I mean, a deciduous late August in a deciduous, but there was no, the sound of fornication and filth and.
He's here again.
Yeah.
There wasn't any of that. It was very, very. It's a very surprisingly quiet. Birds.
Did you talk to yourself?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think. Martin's line, which I think is a very, very good one, is he said, civilization is 3 days deep. And certainly by day 4, you were kind of, you were right, thinking in a slightly different way. Let's just put it there. Let's just leave it there.
I love that TV show Alone, where they do that and they just watch people going slightly mad.
Nikki, memo to you for future development. Idea for a podcast. I'm a bibliophile. Get me out of here.
Very good, Andy.
Yeah, that is brilliant.
That sounds amazing. Can I just tell you what, by contrast,
Please,
what were you doing?
Have you been doing?
You went
summer?
to a wilderness for 4 days and discovered yourself. I went to see my favourite band, the Lemon Twigs, play a concert in Liverpool. John, do you know what their encore was?
Go on.
They went, we'd like to play a song now by some Liverpool legends. Everybody's going, it's going to be the Beatles. They played How Do You Do It by Jerry and the Pacemakers. And then they played Any Time At All by the Beatles.
Oh, that's nice.
And it was so amazing, so kind of magical. The Lemon Twigs also have a thing. They're from New York City, but obviously they have a strong affiliation with the Port of Liverpool and the city of Merseybeat. And they describe their own music as, John, Jersey Beat.
Jersey Beat.
Oh, that's good.
Yes,
That's
of course.
good.
I love them.
Oh, that's great.
You got time for a squeeze one more book in?
Yeah, please. I would love to talk about this. So, one of the lovely things about doing Backlisted for the last few years is we often have guests who write books, and obviously we're delighted they write the books. And as John was saying earlier about Sarah Perry, it becomes our guests often become like family to us. They come back on the show, and we want them to do well, right, John? We're inappropriately proud of them. Our dear friend, the writer Sam Leith, who is also the literary editor at The Spectator, has been on Backlisted a couple of times. Most recently, he was on Bravely to discuss Thomas Pynchon, and he was on before then to talk about Ray Bradbury.
Yeah.
He has a new book out, which I love Sam's work. I think this is a real step forward for him, and an important book that it isn't an exaggeration to say that everyone listening to this podcast, if you are interested in books, you will want to read this book by Sam Leith.
Wow.
It's called The Haunted Wood, A History of Childhood Reading. And it comes garlanded with praise from, amongst others, Philip Pullman, Tom Holland, our former guest, Lucy Mangan, our former guest, Nina Stibbe, our yet-to-be guest, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams. Brilliant. And they are united in their praise for this book, which is, on one level, about the history of children's literature, but it's also about the history of childhood and what we think of as childhood since the advent of children's literature. There would be no literature for children unless we began to think of children as people with particular needs, desires, and qualities that required entertaining. And of course, it's a comparatively recent phenomenon. And the way Sam tracks this is to write a series of essays about particular authors or combinations of authors and explore the history of their lives, talk about the impact they made in their era, and then, like any good critic should, offer their views on what works in their writing and perhaps what doesn't work anymore. I found it as gripping as a thriller by George Markstein. There you go. Stick that on the paperback.
Yeah, I love it.
One World. But let me give you an example. So there's a section here called Down the Rabbit Hole, the Dawning of the Golden Age of Children's Literature. And there are two essays. And the first is called Curiouser and Curiouser. And that discusses the work of Lewis Carroll and Charles Kingsley. And then the following essay, which discusses books by Thomas Hughes, W.H.G. Kingston, and Boy's Own Comics, is called Incuriouser and Incuriouser. So there's a constant dialectic, if you will. Sorry, Sam would never use that word. Of a tension between types of literature, types of author, types of reader. And for instance, the section on post-war writers, post-Second World War writers, covers Enid Blyton, Alison Utley, Philippa Pearce, Lucy M. Boston, C.S. Lewis, Tove Jansson, and Astrid Lindgren.
Yep.
Oh, we've still got more of those to do. That's given us a big
isn't
list
it good?
of more to do.
I am offering now a spoiler. Sam will be joining us later in the year in season 3 to discuss a book he absolutely loves and which I remember from my childhood very fondly, which is called Grinny by Nicholas Fisk.
Yeah.
And he writes so eloquently about that here. However, I would just like to read a little bit from this book because it takes as a starting point another subject we covered on Backlisted with our friends Dr. Matthew Sweet and Una McCormack, and that is the Doctor Who novels of Terrance Dicks. And Sam tackles here the question in the 1970s of what TV tie-ins or adaptations, what kind of a threat they posed to our children. And John, you've said before, there's always something that's a threat to reading.
Always, yeah.
Films.
Yeah, films.
Then video games.
Radio.
CD-ROMs were a terrible threat to reading.
It was radio before that, and then music hall was a threat to reading.
Right, so it's a perennial theme. Yeah. This is what Sam has to say about that subject then and now. And I just want to read this because I read this and I thought, yeah, this is the mission statement / aesthetic of what we've been trying to do on here for the last nearly 10 years. Terence Dicks's Doctor Who novels were only one of the more prominent cases in point. Annuals connected to the Wombles, to Crackerjack, to Blue Peter, to Sooty, Play School, and collectible sticker books proliferated in the 1970s. Popular TV shows and films gave rise to toys, and by the 1980s, toys were starting to give rise to TV shows. G.I. Joe was a toy, originally launched in 1962, that became a comics and later film franchise. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles jumped from a rather sophisticated underground comic book in 1984 to a range of action figures and thence to the small and big screens. Transformers was a TV cartoon that began life in 1984 as a marketing exercise for a range of toys and spawned a multimedia franchise incorporating feature films, video games, comic books, and novelizations. Now, in our own age, there are probably more video games that have become TV series than there are video games made of TV series. Lego, which started off appropriating established characters and mise en scène, the own brand Space Lego of the 1980s, is now Star Wars Lego, has become something like a whole new medium of its own. You don't just have Batman Lego, you have a Lego Batman video game and a big screen Lego Batman movie. From the top-down point of view, this is no more than the free market doing what it does, finding ever more abstruse ways to suck profit from intellectual property on every platform in which, as marketing folk might say, brand recognition can be leveraged. But from the bottom-up, child's eye perspective, it's completely natural. Stories spill over. When you're playing with an action figure, you're writing a story. Children are omnivorous. They see a natural continuity between the books, the comics, the video games, the TV show, the feature film, the action figures, the dressing up costume, as do the hosts and producer of Backlisted. No, it doesn't say that. Television, in other words, like theatre and radio before it, and like role-playing games and the choose-your-own-adventure books that had a vogue in the 70s and 80s, took its place in a storytelling ecosystem that was and continues to be roomy enough to accommodate potentially endless diversity.
That is very, very...
Now, what that does for me is encourages me to read. It doesn't encourage me to go to video games or TikTok or any. It encourages me to read because I trust the author, because the author is able to accommodate those differences as part of how we as people process popular and less popular culture. I really love this book. One of those books that I read and thought, my goodness, I know the person who wrote this. And that's a real nice privilege. So it's called The Haunted Wood, A History of Childhood Reading by Sam Leith. It's published by One World. It's in the shops now. Yes, it costs £30, but I'm going to guess if you're in the UK, it may well appear on tables in the run-up to Christmas.
One would hope.
That's just a hunch.
And Sam Leith is going to be with us to talk about Grinny, you say?
He is. Grinny by Nicholas Fisk. Sam will be joining us later
in Series 3.
And we've got a few other books we're going to announce as well.
Do you want to say what we've got coming up?
Yeah, so the next book we're doing and the next episode of Backlisted will be Laurie Segal's Her First American.
Now, we should just say I talked about Her First American, which was sent to me by a wonderful listener / writer called Tom Nisley during the first lockdown a few years ago. We are thrilled that we are going to be making a full episode on this novel, Laurie Segal's Her First American. John's been reading it this week. I know, John, that you have been blown away by it.
Yeah.
I remember being impressed by the way you talked about it and thinking, making a mental note that at one point I should absolutely catch up and read it.
Well, here we have the excuse to do so.
Yeah.
So what have we got coming up? Our next episode will be recorded at Foyles in
So the one
Bookshop
after,
in
the
London.
one after her first
Yeah.
American is going to be the Octavia Butler book, The Parable of the Sower.
And there are tickets available now from the Foyles website if you wish to join us for that live recording on Wednesday, the 25th of September.
I mean, we can actually say what the guests are for that one because they're on the
We
website.
can.
Marvellous return of Selena Godden, who hasn't been on Backlisted since she blew us all away with her last exit to Brooklyn episode, which must be getting on for 8 years ago.
Season 1, early in season
1. And the brilliant Una McCormack, who I think this might be her 7th Backlisted. She's done
Friend of the show.
If
If you go onto our archive, which you can find wherever you get your podcast, listen to the episode recorded at the Port Eliot Festival in Cornwall, where Max Porter and Una McCormack joined us to talk about Ridley Walker by Russell Hoban. One of the most extraordinary experiences of our time doing this show.
Absolutely.
And so we are thrilled that Selena and Una are coming to talk to us about
truly great,
Parable of the Sower.
Truly great. Still, I think, cruelly underrated writer, although Octavia Butler's star is definitely rising, and this a very great novel.
Okay, the show after that is going to be on a book that was published about 30 years ago. It's by a man called James Young, and it's called Nico, Songs They Never Play on the Radio. And it's a book by a gentleman who was in the singer Nico's band in the 1980s and is the most tragic and comic of tragicomic memoirs about what it's like to be in a band with someone who is both a great artist and a colossal pain in the arse. And we are I can't say who the guests are who are joining us, but we have two guests so perfect to discuss this very funny, but perhaps rather dated memoir that I personally am tremendously excited that we're recording this episode. If you have never read James Young's Nico, Songs They Never Play on the Radio, if you don't know who Nico is, if you've never heard the Velvet Underground and Nico, and there must be people out there who never have done, you don't need to know who Nico is, because the character you meet in the pages of that book is so well defined and so well drawn.
Right.
You will both love her and hate her as much as James Young does.
Okay.
So we will be talking about that. Nikki, what is the next show?
The next show after that is our Halloween show, and I don't think we should reveal what our Halloween show is just yet.
Okay, fine.
Because I think, it's always good to have keep people excited coming back for more. But we got a Halloween show after that. Then we got our Christmas episode, and we got all sorts of stuff.
And also, we should say our Halloween show is being recorded again at Foyles, live in front of an audience.
Yeah.
Our dear friend Andrew Mail, as he has done every year, will be joining us for that show. We won't say what it is
just yet, but soon the tickets will be available.
Soon the tickets will be available, and you will find out. And then I think we do. Is it Grinny by Nicholas Fisk with Sam after that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got lots of stuff coming up. Right, we better go because John's got to go and sit and make some noise. You've got a lot of chatting to catch up with, probably, haven't you?
Well, I'm just trying to keep things on an even keel. Re-entry is.
I have to try and escape from the village again, so wish me luck with that.
Yeah, good luck. All right. Lovely
Thanks
to see you
much.
both.
Thanks so much, everybody. We hope you've enjoyed this prelude to season 3.
Absolutely. And remember, if you want to sign up to get Backlisted ad-free and you get 2 extra podcasts a month, sign up to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/backlisted. See you there.
Bye.
Bye.